Welcome to In the Driver's Seat. I am Lisa French. I'm a former race car driver turned empowerment coach. This is my first episode, so I appreciate you being here. What this podcast is going to be about is exploring mindset, beliefs, and deliberately creating a life that you truly love. What it's not going to be is perfect. I am showing up authentically myself. There will probably be lots of mistakes. And big lesson that I've learned this year is done is better than perfect. And while I like to be a perfectionist in a lot of things, this is not going to probably be one of those that I accomplish. I'm just going to be real. I'm going to be myself and learn along the way. So it'll probably get better as the more I do it. These first episodes are basically just going to be kind of intro stories to backstories to what I feel are monumental things that made me who I am today. And I'm just going to share, they're going to be very deep, personal. And even if you've known me for a really long time, you may have not heard some of these stories. I'm not sharing them because I believe that my past defines me. But what I do believe defines me is how I got through those situations through resiliency and self-discovery and just lots of lessons learned. And recovering and a lot of heartbreak, coming through heartbreak was some tough moments. So I came across a quote recently, Brene Brown's, and I felt that really tells the reason why I want to share these stories with you all. One day you will tell your story of how you overcame what you went through, and it will become someone else's survival guide. And I do know it is some point in my life after it just felt like one thing after another kept happening that I felt that I was truly supposed to teach. Like I was supposed to share my story and how I always kind of rose up and my life always improved after everything I went through. So I want to share that story, and I eventually will have guests and they are inspiring stories too. Well, I hope all our stories inspire you to make meaningful change in your life. So let's get started with this first one. The first one is basically, I'm just going to talk about where we all start with our parents. But this one has a bit of a twist in the fact that I learned a family secret, and the family secret was me. So my parents met in Illinois and they moved to Southeast Iowa, which is where I was born. But I don't remember much about my parents being together other than the fighting. Like there was a lot of what I do remember it was the fighting, and not like if it was constant. I really don't know about that, but that's what I stuck in my brain. And I even have a memory of hiding behind a couch one time while there was a fight going on. And so when they divorced, which was before I started kindergarten, I actually remember the feeling of just being relieved. You know, a lot of people try to hold on to marriages that aren't working because of children. And I always say because I speak from what my experience was I was glad that they divorced. I was glad it was over. I was glad the fighting was done. And I just felt it was healthier for everyone, even though I was really young. That's what I remember. I just remember feeling, thank goodness. The bad part of it is that my mom ended up moving almost an hour away. My dad had custody of my younger brother and me. And there was nothing wrong with my mom. There was no reason why she didn't get custody, because obviously that was very unusual in the 70s, mid 70s. But I think it had a lot to do with my dad my dad wanted it that way. So that's the way it happened. And so obviously my parents were also older when they had us. I mean, it's pretty common now in these days, but back in the 70s, they were probably considered older parents in their mid to mid 30s. And my dad did the best he could. I mean, he did a pretty good job as being a single parent, being a dad, raising two children. He probably didn't know a whole lot about parenting. And he had his own business, and that was a bit of a struggle as well financially at times. Well, most of the time. But he did a good job, and he had a huge impact on who I am today as well. But it's weird because I can't articulate it really well, but throughout growing up, I always felt a little different than my family. I never knew why. Like, I never knew why I felt different. I looked different. My personality is different. And again, nothing like one way or like it was good or bad. I just felt different. Something always felt off to me. But like, I was loved. I was well loved. There was nothing wrong with that. I was very much a daddy's girl. Spent a lot of time with my dad. The next episode, I'll talk about racing, which I ended up doing it. Well, as I said, I was a former driver, but that had to do with my dad. And so it was just weird. Like, when people talk about me, oh, where'd you get your red hair? And because obviously a lot of times they would see me with my dad who had dark hair, and well, where'd you get your red hair? And I'd say my mom, but every time I'd say it, I felt like it wasn't the answer. I couldn't even tell you why. So now I've come to high school in biology class, and we were learning about genetics. And we're learning about recessive and dominant gene traits. And one of the gene traits we talked about or learned about was eye color. And as you can see, I have very dark brown eyes. My mom had been married once before and I have four older half siblings. All of them have green eyes. My mom has green eyes. My dad had green eyes. Grandparents. No one. My younger brother, everyone had green eyes. And maybe my grandma French had blue eyes. I don't remember. But regardless, no one had brown eyes. No one. So I called my mom and I asked her about it. Like, well, that's a dominant trait. Like, you would think someone in the family had it. Like, where did I get my brown eyes? And she had said that my great grandma on her side had brown eyes. And I kind of remember this black and white picture of her. And I go, oh, okay, no big deal. So sometime after that, I had went to visit my mom, and she came into the room I was in. And when she walked in, she was crying. And I'm like, Mom, why are you crying? And she said, I can't lie to you. And I said, yeah, okay. She said, well, you asked me about where your brown eyes came from. I'm like, yeah, okay. She said, well, what I told you wasn't exactly the truth. And okay. And she said, your dad isn't your dad. And even then, I'm still not really like, I go, okay. And she said, Leland is your dad. And I knew when she said his name, I knew who he was because my mom had dated him for several years after my parents divorced. So I actually have pictures of us together. I have a picture of him, some pictures of him. And as soon as she said it, I was like, oh yeah, like, of course. Now everything in the world makes sense. Where my eyes came from, I'm not a spitting image of him, but I'm very much look like my biological father. I would even say then that's also the color of my red hair matched his than my mom. And then, so that's why also my intuition was telling me when I'd say my red hair came from my mom, like something was off with that. Me saying that, it felt weird inside and I didn't know why. So I just was like, oh my gosh. And my mom's still crying and she's saying, your dad made me say, like he never wanted me to tell you. And all I could think of was what she explained what happened. And she said, my dad and her had split up. And so Dale and Ann they had separated. And she was seeing Leland for a while and then got back together with my dad. And after she got back together with my dad, they found out she was pregnant. And she said they never thought anything of it until I was born. And when I was born, she said everyone knew exactly who I belonged to. So I thought it was really incredible. All I could feel in my heart was immense love. I mean, just the fact that these two men, again, my dad was a bit of a strong personality, so it's probably not as simple as what I'm going to say here, but I felt that they both did what they thought was best for me. My dad raised me as his. I am Dale French's daughter, Lisa French. Leland stepped away and let another man raise his first child, his daughter. And everyone knew, even Leland's whole family knew about my existence. And no one ever treated me differently, ever. Never treated me like I didn't belong, or anything. It's just felt really loving. And I guess the reason why, in a way, I'm sharing this story is, obviously it's not extremely unusual, and people, especially nowadays, are finding out these secrets with ancestry tests and 23andMe tests. But the reason why I'm sharing it is because I think in that moment, I could have made another choice. I could have been really angry because, like I said, there were so many times during my life, I just felt like something was off in who I was. Like, I couldn't explain it. I didn't know why I felt so different than the rest of my family. And I could have been really angry at the fact that I didn't get a chance to have Leland as my father. And I remember, what I remember about him is I probably am a lot more like him in personality wise. Like, I remember his calmness. He was very kind, gentle person. And yet that's not what came over me. And when I look back at Lisa French, when I was in 17, 18 years old, however old I was when I found this out, that I'm pretty proud of. That was the emotional choice that I went with, was just feeling really loved. And I never told my dad, ever, never told him. And because it wasn't important. What was important is that how loved that he raised me as his daughter. It would have crushed him, even though it meant no difference to me in knowing this information. It would have crushed him that I knew. It would have changed in his heart. Not that he would change but he would have been upset that I would have known, I think. So, but what was even crazier is that my best guy friend in high school, Jason, ended up marrying my biological cousin, Carol. And she remembers us. I think she had been to my mom's house and she remembers. I do not remember that. I do not remember her as a child, but I think it's super cool to have that connection where someone I cared a lot about from, my childhood and my high school days that ends up marrying an actual blood relative of mine and gives me that connection, where I could ask her questions about that side of the family. And she tells me that, different family members will ask about me, or her mom would love to have me over for Christmas or whatever. So, anyway, there was a point in time people asked me if why don't I tell Leland? And I actually attempted to let him know, reach out to him. My son, who's now 30, was sometime within the first year that he was born, maybe second year. And I had wrote a letter and I put photos of myself and getting married and had a baby. And I don't remember what I wrote about, but it was more about just saying, I thought you would like to know. And it wasn't me trying to gain him into my life, because at this point, I had lost my dad. So Dale French. So I felt like it wasn't going to hurt him, Dale, that I would reach out to Leland. But I also thought, like, maybe Leland would like to know that, hey, you technically have a grandchild. And I got the letter back in the mail saying not interested. And I was just kind of crushed, because I thought, oh my gosh, like, he doesn't want to acknowledge me whatsoever. And my mom said, no, that's not what happened. That he had eventually married, and that she said, I guarantee you he would have loved to have heard from you, but his wife likely intercepted that letter and mailed it back to you. So, which, I mean, I get it. So that's where that story, there's really no purpose of sharing it other than the fact that you do have choices in how you react to things. And I could have been really angry. I could still be angry, if I chose to be, that's where I went with that. But instead, I just felt really blessed that everyone, it is a little weird to think that for 17, 18 years of my life, that everyone knew about who I was genetically, but me. So, but the soul knows, right? Something was telling me it was off, and eventually the truth came out. I'm happy to know. I'm happy to have the connection with at least Carol, my cousin. So that's it for this chapter. This is just the beginning of our adventure together. I hope you move on to the next episode, which is going to be about racing and how that impacted my life and it was probably one of the biggest impacts on my life and who I am today. So until next time, remember, you are in the driver's seat of your own life and you are loved. Thank you.